All right, and here we are for week 8. And week 8 is one of the weeks I sort of planned that we would step back and instead of introducing you to another book, we'd go back again to some of the scripture that we did earlier. You kind of probably have noticed that there's been a sort of cyclical process. A text, parts of scripture, text, parts of scripture, questions, reflection, sort of new theoretical frameworks to look through, etc. So that's really rooted in my conviction that what we're doing is what I would call an iterative process of critical reflection. So, and particularly, I think the way that I've found Scripture working in my life and in some of these movements we've been talking about is exactly that. You keep coming back to same texts of Scripture over and over and over. You keep learning new things. You come back again. You see new things. You go back. You've got new questions for what you might be learning from a book or culture or whatever. Back to Scripture, reflection, back and forth. Iterative, meaning over time and repetitive. Critical, not in the sense of negative, but of intentionally thinking things through, and reflection in the light of new learning, practice, experience, etc. Not just books and not just scripture, but our prayer life, what we're experiencing as we meet with people, etc. So hopefully you're experiencing some of that. And the first point I want to make about that is hopefully you will also see how that could apply even in disciple making. That there's this ongoing, iterative, critical reflection on life that is really at the heart of disciple making, and letting Scripture and people's experiences and then coming back and asking questions and reflecting really is a part of that, and just trusting that God is at work in that whole process. So hopefully we're experiencing a little bit of that in the class. So this week, I don't have a big video intro except to say we're going back to all the scriptural texts: Luke, Acts, Galatians, 1 John, and thinking now about all the stuff you've been reading, and trying to think through how all of this is shaping out in your ideas of disciple making, and in this context, church planting. So we've done the Christendom stuff. We've done how we can misinterpret Scripture because of theoretical frames. We've talked about cognitive environments and horizons and all of that. And you've looked at least one model of a movement, and tried to tie that to the bigger movement. So what we want to do now is go back to another book, or set of books about movements, which is the New Testament, which is the story of, in the Gospels and Acts, the story of a movement. It's just a narrative of how it happened. Not everything there is prescriptive. It's descriptive. So we have to learn from it and think, man, what was happening there, and how does that, are there themes and principles and examples that I could sort of modify and apply in my situation? And then there's the letters, which are not theological things primarily. That's how we've tended to read them. Not even devotional primarily. They are windows into apostolic leaders trying to help groups of disciples continue to grow and develop. It's a window in to helping a movement stay healthy or get healthy. Particularly Paul's letters, where he's dealing with major issues in most of those letters. So what I want you to do is go back now and rethink all that stuff from the perspective of how that helps you think about church planting and discipleship. And what kind of forms did things take? And was it always the same form? Was it, were there some common functions that you find? And so while I want you to skim through all the stuff, you might want to zero in on things, places where, especially in Acts, Luke kind of pulls back the veil a little bit and describes early believers and what they were doing together. Acts 2, for example, 42 to 47 is a classic spot. you will see described there certain things they were devoted to doing, certain functions and habits they had as a community. Same thing later in Acts 4. Um, in Acts 6, when they pick um, what we've come to call deacons, although it's interesting, there's two sets of deacons in Acts 6. There's the ones waiting on tables and those who are deacons of the word. So don't, again, form and function get all messed up in our history. But at the end of Acts 14, there's a set of descriptors of Paul's process of evangelism, strengthening disciples, selecting elders, and reporting back and that sort of stuff. So just looking for those sort of windows into what it meant to be the church. Structures, forms, habits, etc. And just be reflecting on that in the light of your own practice. So as you get involved making disciples cross-culturally, as people come to faith, what do they do? And what form should that take? Even simple things, when, where, how, what, when they meet. Is there one way to do all that stuff? Is there only one way for people to be devoted to apostolic teaching or prayer, for example? What does that look like in different cultural contexts? So just be reflecting on that, and I'm sure in the posts in our discussion threads we'll be unpacking that and helping each other get our minds around some different concepts. Okay, so enjoy. Thank you.